As I was growing up and I was having these personal experiences and being exposed to mediumship, also that was what made me interested in the topic. But at the same time, I wanted to be a scientist, and I didn't know at the time that I could study scientifically the mind-brain relate. I didn't even know there was such thing called mind-brain relationship or mind beyond the body.
Today's guest is Marina Weiler, PhD. Dr. Weiler is an assistant professor of psychiatry and neurobehavioral sciences in the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. Dr.
If you are not at least open to the possibility of an afterlife, is because you haven't read about the evidence yet. I'm a neuroscientist by training. I did my PhD in Brazil, and then I moved to the US in 2016 to do my first postdoc in basic neuroscience and brain stimulation. Then I did another postdoc at UCLA. That's what anecdotal evidence should do. So researchers and scientists, they look at the anecdotal evidence, they look at the stories, and then they build the hypothesis, and then they feel motivated to do more scientifically grounded work, which is what we are doing right now. That to me was so fascinating, like a person who is able to unlock all the channels and computers protected by password. There are many stories of parents or caregivers telling me that they were never able to hide anything in their houses from the non-speaker. The non-speaker always knew where to look for, like inside cabinets. They were hiding sweets or anything. They could never hide from the non-speaker. So it's almost like they truly feel what you are feeling. And again, like all of those things are to me evidence that they are tapping into possibly your mind, your consciousness.
I am beyond excited to speak now with Dr. Marina Weiler. Are you like me and have a hard time learning to listen to or trust your intuition? Or you trust it, but would like to know how to better tune into your intuition? I want to share this event I'm attending. It's called Amplify Your Intuition, a guided journey to trusting your inner wisdom, taught by Karen Bell, who's an internationally recognized clairvoyant and channeler. This event will be hosted by one of my favorite places, the Omega Institute, where transformation becomes real. It's virtual, so it'll be affordable and easy to attend. As we all know, intuition is one of the most powerful tools we have to understand our life purpose, the right people for us, the wrong people for us. In this Omega workshop, Karen gives us simple tools to help us recognize the subtle ways intuition speaks, how to differentiate it from fear or wishful thinking, and how to cultivate trust in our inner guidance. I'll be there. I go to as many Omega events as I can. It will be March 4th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. EST. You can sign up on eomega.org. And while you're there, be sure to check out their other incredible transformative events. That's eomega.org. Today's guest is Dr. Marina Weiler from the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies. And I met her at the IONS conference. And as all of you know, the Division of Perceptual Studies was really the number one thing that helped me early on in my grief. So welcome, Dr. Weiler.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for having me.
And Marina, it's great to talk with you. So tell us a bit about your background and education, all of that.
I'm a neuroscientist by training. I did my PhD in Brazil studying functional magnetic resonance imaging biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to the US in 2016 to do my first postdoc in basic neuroscience and brain stimulation. Then I did another postdoc at UCLA in 2020, working again with fMRI, but in the context of epilepsy and traumatic brain injury. And then in 2023, I started my position at DOPS as an assistant professor.
Oh, that's so fascinating that, you have traditional background and you end up at DOPS. How did you even know about it, get interested in it, and want to work there?
I actually got interested in the topic long before I knew about DOPS. So I was already interested in the afterlife and consciousness when I was a lot younger, before going to college. And I was reading about mediumship. I was also having my own personal experiences growing up. But I didn't know until much later, and I would say a few years ago, that you could actually do scientific research with the mind brain relationship or the afterlife. So that's when I found out about DOPS, and I was fascinated about what they were doing here, and I just realized that's what I wanted to do.
So you had experiences. What what was, maybe give an example of maybe the craziest, most veridical or most mind-blowing experience that you had growing up?
When I was growing up, I used to have, and this is something I still do, but I think they were more frequent when I was younger, dreams with deceased people, like deceased family members. My grandma came to me one day. She gave me a message that I then told my mom, and she was very touched by the message, and it made a lot of sense to my mom when I told her what my grandma told in my dream. But it was the experiences that I had the most when I was growing up would be the ones that we call the poltergeist type phenomena. That is, objects falling, like lights messing up, and knocks on door and knocks on the wall. So that would be the experiences that I had, that to me were so I really didn't know what to do with those experiences. I couldn't explain, and many times I was just kind of dismissing them. I was like, yeah, like whatever, it just happened, like this book just fell out of nowhere. Yes, I'm just going to dismiss it. I'm not going to pay too much attention. But those things were happening a lot to me. And at a point that I couldn't just dismiss one instance by accident.
So then I guess I should reverse the question a little. What made you get into neuroscience? Because I assumed, most neuroscientists do not have experience with this stuff. So,
um, so it was interesting because as I was growing up and I was having these personal experiences and being exposed to mediumship. Also, that was what made me interested in the topic. But at the same time, I wanted to be a scientist, and I didn't know at the time that I could study scientifically the mind-brain relate. I didn't even know there was such thing called mind-brain relationship or mind beyond the body. Like, to me, they were just a spiritual phenomena, and they had nothing to do with science. That was my understanding at the time. And I knew I wanted to be a scientist, and I was completely fascinated about the brain and explain human behaviors or perception. I was completely fascinated. I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I want to be a scientist, and I love human behavior and perception. So I'm going to be a neuroscientist. I want to study the brain. So that's what brought me to study neuroscience. And as long after I finished my PhD, that's when I realized that, there is scientific research into the topic, and we can do this in a academic setting. So that's when I realized I could do that.
yeah, okay. Well, it's so important. I think it's going to be one of the things that changes everything in our whole paradigm by having more neuroscientists who are open to this, and more people who have experiences go into science, that depending which, the majority, I believe, never think this is true, then start studying it and changing their mind or have an experience. But I don't know. I might just be biasing that was my experience. And so, you have been working on so many fascinating research topics at the University of Virginia. I would love to get into as much as we can in the time we have, because it would probably be a 5-hour conversation to get into all. But you study mediums, out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, and what's become really kind of a hot topic now with the telepathy tapes, non-speaking children with possibly psychic experiences or paranormal experiences. Did I miss anything?
No, you're right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as much as we can, let's get into all of it. I'd love to hear. Let's start with one of the research experiments you're working on with mediumship. One that maybe pick the one you find the most interesting.
The work with mediumship was an essay that we wrote in 2021 for the Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies, BICS. And Robert Bigelow in 2021, he launched a contest. And the topic of the contest was, what is the best evidence for the afterlife? And he received, I think, a total of 1,300 essays from all over the world. And I think a little over 200 were selected to the final stage. And I wrote an essay with two other friends, Rafael and Alexandre, and we wrote about this famous medium from Brazil. He passed in 2002, so it's been more than 20 years that he passed away now. And his name was Chico Xavier. And Chico Xavier was a very remarkable person and medium because of the body of work he produced. Chico Xavier produced more than 500 books and thousands. It's estimated that he wrote more than 10,000 letters, all attributed to deceased individuals. And what's fascinating about his work is that many of the books he authored, they were attributed to famous writers that produced work while they were alive. So one thing that we are doing right now, and this is the work of my very good friend Alexandre from Brazil, he's doing this linguistic analysis comparing the language and the linguistic style from the work of the authors when they were alive and the mediumistic work attributed to them. And what he found is that there is a high accuracy in terms, it's very compatible, the work produced by the medium in terms of a lot of different aspects, a lot of different criteria, complexity, dialogue between the texts. So these are texts that are very hard to produce because of the language and the linguistic complexity. And what we are finding is that those features are present in the mediumistic work. And this is coming from a man, the medium Chico Xavier, who went to only elementary school. So he had only 4 years of formal education. His family was very humble. He had access to books, but, again, just very little education. He was working 13 hours a day, around 13 hours a day. He would work, his mediumistic work would be produced during the night from 8 p.m. until 2, 3 in the morning every day, where he would write the letters or do his automatic writing. And another thing is that in his letters, many times he brings information about first names, last names, address, cause of death, very, very detailed information about the deceased person and the family. Many times information that not even the family knew about and only found out later when they went to check the deceased material or personal diaries. His work also brings signatures that match the deceased person. So it's very and it has been done scientific work comparing the information that Chico Xavier brings in his letters, in his personal letters, to the information that is actually accurate. And they see that there is not actually the information that is actually available through interviews with the family, and they see that the information is highly accurate. And again, it's like so personal. This is in the 60s, in the 70s, at a time there was no computer, there was no internet. We are talking about ordinary people, not famous people that had their lives on the newspapers or magazines. So there was no way he could have known all the information he was bringing on those letters and his books. So this was the work we did with Chico Xavier, and we are still doing, writing a paper with Alexandre's work on the comparing the language and linguistic style of some mediumistic works, some mediumistic books, I'm sorry. And we submitted this essay to the contest, to the BIGS contest, and we won an award. So we won the 4th place.
Amazing.
Evidence for the afterlife. We were saying that the work of Chico Xavier, that we consider our white crow, is a very good evidence for afterlife.
I mean, so it was not only the accuracy of the information and content he got, but it was also he wrote in a tone that was not his. I mean, he wrote beautiful literature with, basically an elementary school education. And then in the letters, was his voice in a different tone as well? Was it in the tone of the...
Yes, he would use words that he never heard about. He used to write in languages that he never learned about: Arabic, English, Spanish, and many other different languages that he's never learned. Again, he came from a very humble family. So yes, he was using the vocabulary of the deceased person.
Wow. Yeah, I mean...
And the person, the bereaved family, like the parents, once they received, not only parents, it could be any family member, once they were reading the letters, they could really see the deceased language in the letter. And as I told you, saying information that only the family knew, like, oh, when I died, like causes of death. I remember Dad saying when I was a kid that he liked, like, very personal information, and many times signatures too.
Oh my God. It's so fascinating. Wow. That's amazing research. And had you traveled and met him, or was this on historic data?
This is historic data. I've never met him.
Okay.
However, Chico Xavier was very famous in Brazil. He passed in 2002, but I grew up, like he was just so famous. He actually was nominated for the Nobel Peace. Is it, am I saying
Nobel Peace?
Nobel Peace, yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
When was this? I don't remember when exactly it was, but he was nominated. And for all his charity work, because all the money he was raising from his books, he was giving to charity work. So he produced a huge body of work, but he never made any money out of it. So everyone in Brazil knew about him. He would be on the newspapers and the television, and we would see him on shows doing automatic writing. So I didn't know him personally, but everyone at my age knows who he is.
Oh, well, that sounds like a fascinating paper, and congrats on the award. That's the one that Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove won the grand prize for, that award,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, he got the first prize, yes.
Yeah. I mean, that must have been a hard decision for Bigelow. All of the submitted papers of those top 5, I guess. I mean, probably all of them. And I think a lot of
Yeah,
our listeners have read a lot of all of the prize-winning essays of different categories or different, grand down, to I forget how many prizes they gave, but it was a lot, and they were so fascinating.
So originally, so they gave 3. There was the first, the second, and the third prize, and then they had a group for the 4th
Yeah.
place. And I remember that they said that they received so many good
Mhm.
essays that they expanded the prize. So they gave another, if I'm not mistaken, 11
Yeah.
prizes to the essays because I think they received a lot of good work.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that just shows how much evidence there is out there. But yeah, I have the list. I've read most of them. So yeah. Well, congratulations on that. And then let's get into another topic of that you've worked with. What have you done with out of body experiments, out of body experiences?
Out of body experiences, experiments. Yes,
I should call them, yes, with you, as out of body experiments. That's probably the better term.
with out of body experiences, I've done many different things. And with the OBEs, I have lots of different questions or sub projects, how I call them. So I am trying to one of the questions, for example, that I'm trying to answer is what are the psychological correlates, like the psychological effects of having an OB? We do know by anecdotal evidence that OBs are very transformative. People do report decreased fear of death, increased empathy, increased gratitude and connection with others and universe. So what we were trying to do in a survey is to collect more data, like systematically collect more data using a lot of questionnaires and validated scales to investigate the psychological consequences of having OBs. I'm also investigating what types of entities people are encountering during OBs, what types of after death communication people are having during out of body experiences and how do they express, and if it has any impact on grief, if those communications can maybe alleviate their grief and bereavement. I'm also trying to understand what is happening in the brain when people are having out of body experiences. So, working with experienced individuals who can induce OBs on demand. And that's the only way why we can hook up an EEG and ask them to induce OBs so we can see what's happening in their brains. I have also asked participants to go see a target in another room, so testing the veridicality and potential extrasensory perception. Um, I've been doing a lot of interviews to try to understand what is it like to be on an OB state in terms of do you have a body? Do you not have a body? Does it feel lighter? Does it feel quicker? How do you think? How do you feel? Where do you go to? So I've been these deep phenomenological analysis into OBs too. And more recently, I've been collecting some case stories of veridical OBs. That's how we can call them, which is those stories that people who perceived something that can be verified later. So I can either verify by talking to a third person, a witness, and the idea here would be to develop a what I call a veridicality index, which it would be pretty much a number that we can apply to spontaneous accounts of out of body experiences that have the veridical component.
Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality in the title. I think probably most of our listeners would love to hear an example of one of the most veridical ones that you have been researching, or can you share?
Yes, I can. In my own research, when I was asking participants to go see a target in the next room, they were hooked in the with the EEG, and they were inducing their OBEs. And I asked the participants to go see a target in a third room that was displayed on a laptop, randomly chosen. And two of those participants were able to describe what was happening in the researcher's room. So that's interesting because none of them was actually able to tell me what the target was. I mean, they did get impressions of like, oh, I think the target is, and they would bring me like impressions of shapes and colors, and some of them did say like an object or something, but none of them was considered a hit. But two of those participants, they were able to tell me what the researchers were doing during their OBs, and telling me details like where we were sitting, what we were doing. In one of the instances, my colleague, the other researcher who was there with me, he was sitting on a chair that he never sat before. So that was kind of interesting. He was reading a book at the time, and we could verify that information. And I've also been interviewing people. This, to me, they are so fascinating. I did talk to a family, two parents, who told me they have a 3-year-old, and his 3-year-old son had an OBE one day, and then the following day he just woke up super excited. This happened during the night. He woke up super excited saying, "Mommy, Daddy, I had an OBE last night. My body came out of the body," the way he was describing it. And he could describe what the parents were doing. He was already asleep in his bedroom with the door shut and everything. And the parents were watching TV, sitting on the couch, and he was able to describe what they were doing. And of course, I asked the parents, like, is this like a normal configuration, something that you usually do that the kid could just guessing? And they said no, like he usually goes to bed very early. He doesn't see us watching a movie, after he goes to bed. And it would be hard to believe that a 3-year-old would come up and lie about that just for attention, saying my body came out of my body and I was flying and I came here to the living room and I saw the two of you. I have a hard time believing he would just lie for attention, or he would be fantasizing. That's not the type of things that kids fantasize about. And
right.
sorry.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I feel if a kid, like when I would make up stories as a kid, and I think most kids are like this, they're fantastical. They're not like, I saw you watching movies. They're like, I went out of body and there was a whole world of candy and I rode a unicorn. It's like something they would love to be true. Stories like writing and creating fantasy worlds rather than something so mundane, and I've always loved how there's so much mundane aspects to this research. It makes it seem so real and solid and part of reality.
And I did ask the mom, does he usually share his dreams? And she was like, no, he never tells me about his dreams. It's not comparable. It's not something that, oh yeah, he's always telling me about his dreams and that's how he that's the narrative, that how usually he talks. It's not about that. So a 3-year-old does not elaborate on a dream, doesn't come the following day saying this is what happened to me. So that was kind of very interesting. And he actually had another one. The family just contacted me last week, and he had another one at school when he was awake.
Oh
He
my
was
God.
just playing, and he got upset because the other kid didn't invite him to play, and he got upset with them. And then he had an out of body experience, and he could see everything that was happening in the playground, and he could see himself and the other kids playing. So that was kind of interesting too. There are other accounts. There are other fascinating accounts. Someone else that I interviewed who could see what his sister was wearing. And his sister had very bad migraines. And sometimes when she went to bed, she used to wear this white, that looks like a bandage, something around her head for her migraines. And he didn't know about that. So one day, this guy is sleeping in his sister's house, and he has an out of body experience. And oh, I'm sorry, he was not sleeping in his sister's house, but he does have an out of body experience. And he sees his sister wearing this white thing around her head. And then he gets really surprised. He's like, I've never seen her wearing this when we lived together decades before. And then he goes and asks her, and she was like, yeah, I had a headache, I had a migraine, and that's what I used to, and it helps me sleep. So many verifiable aspects, and there are many other stories like that.
It's yeah, amazing. We really are getting so much evidence that consciousness is different than we've been raised to believe, or at least I was raised to believe. I was raised in a very neuroscience minded culture. It's created by a brain. That's it. Nothing more to talk about. And you don't want to talk about it when that's what you think the answer is, because it's too sad. It's like, I never wanted to think about life after death as, once I got to be maybe a teenager, because I didn't think there was anything. So I always avoided thinking about it. And so another experiment group you've done is remote viewing. What have you done with that? And also maybe explain the difference between an out-of-body experience and remote viewing, because I think that can get a little murky to some people. It still gets a little murky to me exactly what the difference would be.
Yes. And I'm going to add to that, out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, and lucid dreaming. They are all so similar, and it gets really murky, as you mentioned. I would say the main difference between out-of-body and experiences and remote viewing is the disembodiment feeling that we see in OBs. And that's the core feature of an OB, is people do have the very clear sensation that they are not in their physical bodies anymore. And again, that same difference can be used to distinguish OBs from lucid dreaming. So people come to me and they say, oh, I had this experience last night that I was flying around. Is this an out-of-body experience? And then what I do is usually I ask them back, did you have the sensation that you are not in your physical body? What we call disembodiment. And many times when people have those experiences, they would say no. I didn't explicitly feel that I was separated from my physical body. Then that might usually be a lucid dreaming if the person is aware that they are dreaming, that they are not awake at least. Then that's a lucid dreaming. In remote viewing, again, it's the same thing. In remote viewing, people are perceiving information. They are receiving information about something. Remote viewing is more about a technique that is not too much about the phenomenon or how the person feels. It's more, remote viewing is a technique that is used to gather information about something. And it's interesting because the concept of remote viewing is also associated with a hit. So if a person is not on target or is like not accurate at all, there is that feeling that, oh, the person is not remote viewing or the person is trying to remote. So there's a lot of misconceptions here, but it's usually a technique that people engage to try to see something. There is a name, there is an objective, I want to gather information. So it is associated with extrasensory perception. Out of body experiences, they are not necessarily associated with extrasensory perception or the veridical aspect of it, because it's just the disembodiment feeling. So as long as the person feels I am not in my physical body at this moment, it doesn't matter if the veridical component, the ESP component is there. So many times people have OBEs that they go to different realms, different dimensions, they meet God, they see deceased relatives, there are more mystical experiences that doesn't necessarily have the verifiable component, like when people are doing when they are trying to remote view.
Got it. Okay. And what's an experiment? I don't know why I keep mixing up those words today. What is an experiment you have done there with remote viewing?
What we are doing right now here at Jobs, and this is a collaboration with my colleague, David Akunzo. He's actually the PI on that project. We are bringing participants who can remote view. They're good experiencers, so they are able to, they have a good track history of remote viewing. They work with law enforcement. What we are trying to do is to investigate the brain correlates. That's how we try to see what's happening in their brains. So using EEG, 128 channel EEG, when people are remote viewing, and also doing what we call microphenomenology interviews. So we want to investigate very deeply how people are perceiving that information. And what we're going to do is compare information that is a hit versus information that is not, like it's a miss. So how are people, what are the things that can distinguish information that are accurate versus information that is not accurate in terms of how the person is receiving that information, how that information is perceived during the remote viewing experience.
Interesting. Okay. And what have been any interesting results from that?
That experiments, we are still doing those experiments.
Okay.
Yeah. There is no results. I don't think they're analyzing the data yet for that one.
Well, at some point you have to come back on and let us know all the data from these.
Yeah, of course.
And now with non-speakers, I know that's become a big topic that luckily the telepathy tapes have brought to the public. So tell us what research you guys are doing there.
So the research with the remote, the research with the non-speakers, we have two different approaches to the non-speakers project. The first one is more foundational. We're just collecting cases. So we are going to start interacting with families and caregivers and practitioners who have good stories to tell. And we want to understand how they communicate, what are their needs, what are their challenges, and possibly good cases of psychic experiences too. The purpose of that is just to build that foundation and possibly to publish some of these cases in scientific journals and books. So we do have that important aspect, which I think it's it's an important aspect that is going to inform us future studies. And the other approach that we have is a more structured experimental design, in which we are going to be using eye tracking, because we want to see intention or agency or authorship in non-speakers. So For the audience here who have listened to telepathy tapes, you probably know that this is a huge controversy in the field. They're still trying to prove authorship and intention with the non-speakers, and many critics and skeptics that they're saying that the message conveyed by the non-speakers are ideomotor response. A lot of controversy in facilitated communication, but also in spelling to communicate, saying that the communication partner is actually helping, or there's subtle cueing with the formation of the message. So this is a big controversy. Obviously, the psychic experiences, the telepathy is another big one. So what we are trying to do is to kill two birds with one stone. So we are using eye tracking to show agency and intention when the participants are doing telepathy experiments. But we are also going to do the same eye tracking experiments when the participant is just conveying a message, like reading a text and then answering to specific questions, and then do the same when the more adapted to telepathy experiments.
And what are your thoughts on the controversy over the telepathy tapes? I know it scares some of my listeners when they hear, well, you know what? I don't want to put any of that, cut the part that scares. I want you to give your neutral, honest opinion. What are, not comforting my listeners, honestly, what are your thoughts on the controversy?
My thoughts were that people were very hard, and I think people took it for some reason, almost like ideologically and personally, what the message behind the telepathy tapes. Kai Dickens did a great job. She's a great storyteller, and she's touching on something that is highly controversial. Two things that are highly controversial, as we mentioned, the intention and the telepathy. And obviously, if you are a leader and you are talking about controversial topics and you want to change the status quo, people are going to attack you. That's going to happen no matter what. And people did attack her, I think sometimes with ungrounded basis, saying using facilitated communication as an argument to dismiss the results she found, which is very interesting because I did ask Kai Dickens how many of your participants were using facilitated communication, and she said 0. And they do use spelling to communicate, which is a different communication approach. Some of the participants were completely independently typing on a keyboard, so there is no influence. There is no sensory leakage. There is no way that another person could be conveying the message or helping or moving the keyboard or anything like that. But it's very interesting that people still go back to the controversies associated with facilitated communication back from the 90s to dismiss the entire podcast. So this is there was a lot of passion. That's how I see. Like, people were just passionate, negatively passionate, attacking the findings. That was one of the criticism. Another one was obviously the way that she did the experiments, on people's house, not controlling for sensory leakage. And again, we have to remember that Kai Dickens is a film producer. She's a storyteller. She's not a scientist. She was not there to publish on a scientific paper and publish her methods and prove beyond reasonable doubt that that's what they're doing. She was investigating. This was completely exploratory. And again, people are using this as an argument, as a criticism, instead of just understanding that anecdotal evidence is just the beginning. It's not the end. It shouldn't be used as a final proof, but it's a beginning. You should inspire curiosity. That's what anecdotal evidence should do. So researchers and scientists, they look at the anecdotal evidence, they look at the stories, and then they build the hypothesis, and then they feel motivated to do more scientifically grounded work, which is what we are doing right now. So yeah, that's why I wrote that blog post and also another paper with Marjorie Willacott, that we are just saying, please be less dogmatic and less passionate about the telepathy tapes, because this is just the beginning of an investigation. She's not trying to definitely prove that this is happening. So we are calling for less dogmatism.
Yeah, and I think that probably needs to be in afterlife research overall. That was one of my big eye-openers, is that skeptics, I always thought skeptics were genuine skeptics, which I consider myself a genuine skeptic, asking the questions and believing research and evidence and not drawing reasonable conclusions till you have an amount of data. But it's blown me away how many make claims without actually having read the papers or delved in. And are you able yet to say, do you think the telepathy tapes were genuine, or not she was obviously genuine in her mission, but do you think the non-speakers were genuinely going to the Hill and getting information, or do you think there is some valid criticisms to the skeptics? If you don't have an answer yet, that's fine.
No, it's fine. I have not come across any criticism that I actually found that was valid. So I haven't read any good text or any critics that came to me with an argument that actually I thought it was reasonable. I think they were all attacking. I think they were unfounded. And the more I see the non-speakers and the more that I study them and the more I talk to caregiver and parents, the more convinced I am that there is something happening there. And it's so interesting because parents and caregivers, they are completely convinced that there is something happening. And I have a hard time believing why they would be lying, or why the non-speakers would be lying, saying we are meeting at the Hill. I don't see a reason for a big hoax. I really don't see that. And I'm slowly approaching this field, and I'm slowly talking to families and caregivers. And the more and more I hear stories that to me are just little pieces in the puzzle, like they're little pieces of evidence that they're telling me that there is definitely something happening there.
I think most of my listeners and myself find that very encouraging, because most of us come to this podcast through grief and can get thrown by skeptical arguments. So thank you. Now, is there a story of a non-speaker that you've either researched or discovered on your own or read about? Is there one that stands out that you really love and would like to share?
About telepathy specifically?
Yeah, about in your research with non-speakers, you said you've been gathering stories and talking to the parents yourself. And is there one story, veridical or fascinating, or one that stands out to you?
Yeah, there is this story that is actually published on a book. So his mom wrote a book, and it's a super long book. If I'm not mistaken, it's like almost 900 pages. But at some point, wow. This is a mom that has 5 kids, and one of them is a non-speaker. And at some point, she describes the experiences that her kid was having that told her there is something here. And it was very interesting because she described that growing up, she could never hide anything under a password. So he would go to Disney channels and he would put the password, and she was constantly changing the password, and he would go there and guess the right password again. And she also tells that one day he was completely fascinated about Disney Channel and Disney characters. And then at school was the same thing. He would go to a lab with when I don't how are those things called, like an IT lab, like with a computer and with
Computer lab,
computers
I
and
guess.
yeah, computer lab, and then he would go to the computers and he knew the passwords. Again, no one told him, so he could type the passwords and unlock a computer. And then one day he just printed all these Disney characters, and then they found him there using a computer. So that to me was so fascinating, like a person who is able to unlock all the channels and computers under protected by password. There are many stories of parents or caregivers telling me that they were never able to hide anything in their houses from the non-speaker. The non-speaker always knew where to look for, like inside cabinets. They were hiding sweets or anything. They could never hide from the non-speaker. Something that people report a lot is that they're very empathic at a different level than other people. So it's more than you would expect by just seeing your body language or your facial gestures. So it's almost like they truly feel what you are feeling. And again, like all of those things are to me evidence that they are tapping into possibly your mind, your consciousness. I personally had a experience with a non-speaker a few months ago when I was at a conference. And this non-speaker was there with his mom and his sister. And this was right after we gave a talk. I was with Marjorie Willacott and Diane Hennessy. The three of us, we gave a panel. And then after we gave the panel, we went to the book signing room. And there was this table. And Diane was here behind me, a little further away. And Marjorie and I, we were at the table. I was standing, and Marjorie was sitting a little, not really touching the table. And then this non-speaker who was attending the conference, he approached us with his mom. And his mom said, "Oh, my son, he really wants to talk to you. It's a pleasure. He wants to meet the three of you because you're doing this research." And then he starts typing on his leatherboard. And it's so interesting because he doesn't look at the leatherboard while he's typing. He looks at you. He looks at the person he wants to give the message to. And he says that he uses his mom's eyes to look at the leatherboard. So he's looking at you, but at the same time, he's typing using his mom's eyes. So that is so interesting. And then his mom reads the message out loud. And something interesting is that while we were at this book signing room and we are all talking, and there are other people interacting with us, and then I decide to ask this non-speaker, "Can you read my mind? If I think about something right now, I'm going to think about a word or about an image. Can you read my mind?" And he agreed. And we were doing the experiments. I was like, okay, let me clear my head. Let me concentrate and think about something. And I thought about a flower. I had an image of a flower in my head. And then he spelled cat. And then I said, "I'm sorry, but that is not accurate." And then as I'm trying to do the experiment again and give him a second chance, the table in front of me moves. And moves, I'm not joking, like 2 inches. And I jumped because it scared me. And then I asked, "What happened here?" And then I looked at Marjorie and I said, did you touch the table? But it couldn't be because just my side of the table moved, not her side. So it couldn't be her. And this was a long table. And then she said, "I didn't touch it." And there was no one close to me that could have done it. And then there was just one of those things that are like, okay, whatever, this is just too crazy. Let's just move on and not think about it. And then he did it again. I mean, the table moved again, jumped a little bit. And then I was like, okay, what's happening here? And then he spelled on the leatherboard and he mummed said, "He's messing up with you." So
Oh no.
and we all just
Oh,
laughed,
fun.
that was so interesting. And then to finish that
So he sounds
story,
playful too, like fun, playful kid. Yeah.
and then his mom told us that yeah, he's very playful. He likes to play around in the house with electronics and the microwave and the lights, and he's always doing playing tricks on people, like turning off laptops and cell phones, and then he turns it back on again. So he is always doing those kind of playful things. And then what was interesting is that the following day, this lady, another lady that was interacting with us while I was talking to the non-speaker and asking him to read my mind, this other lady approached Marjorie the following day and said, Marjorie, I am so sorry. I think I messed up your experiments yesterday. And Marjorie said, what are you talking about? And she said, yesterday, when Marina asked the non speaker to read her mind, at that time, I was really worried about my cat and if my cat was okay because I left him alone home. And I don't know if he was eating and I don't know if he was fine and I don't know if he was missing me. So I was really concerned about my cat. And I think the non-speaker picked up my mind instead of Marina. I think I interfered with the experiment.
My God, that is fascinating.
So that is so funny. And I mean,
Wow.
if the phenomenon is true, if there is such a thing, if he was actually able to read my mind, it totally makes sense that she hijacked because her thoughts had emotion. They were emotionally salient. That it was something that dragged his attentions, whereas I was just randomly without any purpose or any emotions attached. I was just thinking about a flower, and she was there, like really thinking and caring about her cat. So it could make sense. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I, yeah, and they say that those it's most powerful when it has emotion, or people who have no abilities will suddenly get a message when a loved one's in distress. Like there does seem to be emotion that's a component of it, although I guess not 100% of the time. But yeah, I consider that evidence. And then among all this phenomena, what are your thoughts on the similarities or the mechanism? Do you think it's a similar mechanism, or have you studied like physiological responses that are similar among them? What are your thoughts? I don't have enough information to ask as precise a question as I would like about it. So,
That's a really hard question. People constantly ask, what are the mechanisms? And we don't know what the mechanisms are. We don't know how exactly this is happening. This is something that I'm constantly asking myself, what makes a medium a medium? What is different about him? Is it something in his brain? Is it something where, like, why am I not able to see deceased people? Why am I not able to read someone else's mind? I think we all are able at some extent if we really want to develop. I think we all have the capability of having psychic experiences, but some of us will be better, if we think that this is just like any human ability, it's distributed in the population, and most of us are going to have some experiences and some abilities, and just a few of the population, a few people in the population are actually going to have genuine experiences, not genuine in the sense that others don't have, but more something that is more like stronger experiences. So we don't know what the mechanisms are, and I'm constantly asking myself, as I mentioned, I think that even if we do find a brain signature or something that is happening in the brain, yes, they do occur during theta states. I don't think it explains this experience. I think this is just something that is happening in the brain while people are having. I do believe that many of these experiences, they happen during an altered state, maybe theta, hypnagogic, the OBE kind of spectrum seems to happen at that state, and many other experiences that we see in psi, an altered state of experiences, they are happening at that state, but I don't think they totally explain. I don't think that is a mechanism. So yeah, I don't know if I answered to your question.
I don't think it's answerable.
I don't
I
think
think it's a little bit
answerable.
theoretical.
Yeah.
If you want to learn how I went from being a skeptical atheist who thought there was zero chance of an afterlife to a skeptical atheist who thinks an afterlife is highly probable, come check out my books. WTF Just Happened.
But it does seem that some people have a thinner veil, more transliminarity. They're more. It's easier for them to access. If we do think that maybe like consciousness is fundamental, and we do share this sea of consciousness, there is timeless and spaceless, and all the information is there. There seems to be the case that some people are more can access that information more easier than can access that information easier than others. And again, for some reason that I don't fully understand why that happens.
Yeah. Do you think science is ever going to be able to answer what is the mechanism of survival of consciousness, or what is psi? How is this working? Just like we understand air is, oxygen molecules. Do you think it's possible in however many years that we will be able to know?
It's another good question, and I don't know if that's answerable. It's a very metaphysical, and I don't know what it would take. I like to believe that yes, not science could answer, because science is a tool that we use. So it's not that science. We could use the scientific method to answer to some questions. We are already doing that. Whether we are going to have all the answers is a different point. I do believe that to answer to that question, we have to start believing more what people have to say. And this is something is that right now we only have devices. If we want to understand the mechanisms, we have to use physical devices. And the physical devices only measure what's happening in the physical world. And maybe if we talk about an afterlife and consciousness, we are not talking about the physical anymore. We are talking about something completely different. So we need different things to measure something that is not physical. We are trying to understand what are the mechanisms of reincarnation, what are the mechanisms of mediumship. I don't even know how to look like. What tools do we need to answer to that question? Because again, the devices that we have right now, EEG, it's measuring what's happening in the brain, but okay, there's only so much it can tell you. It's only telling you what's happening in the brain. We can use thermal cameras. Yeah, it's happening. It's telling you that there is a change in temperature, but it doesn't really elucidate the mechanisms. You can use biophoton devices. You can use, human scales. You can use a bunch of different devices, but there is only so much that they can tell you because they're only measuring that specific physical feature. And I don't think specifically that the answer to that question is something totally physical.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. It's one of those questions that no one can answer at this stage. It'd be interesting. I wish we could ask someone in a million years, but who knows if our species or planet will be
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I do think that we have to start listening more to experiencers, so if
Yes.
mediums are having these mediumship experiences, we can ask them, how is this happening? How are you acquiring the information? And there is so much we can learn from them, but the scientific community doesn't usually like to, doesn't put too much credibility into first person experiences and what the person is telling you. So, people that have memories of past lives and reincarnation, what are they telling us? They have intermission memories. So they are telling us a lot of things that the if you read a documented case, there many answers are there, but yet we are still trying to find the mechanisms using physical devices, something to measure something in the physical world, because the scientific community is not too worried about asking the person, what do you remember when you were there? Um, the same thing with non-speakers. How are they doing this? I don't know. Let's just ask them. Why not?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much dismissal. And yeah, I actually want your thoughts on that because not only are there really mind blowing, just massive, massive body of experiences, even going back in history, if you start researching the early cases at the SPR, but such a vast body. And then it's backed up by very solid research and data, and also an astronomical body of data. Why do you think a large portion of the scientific community still completely dismisses that? Because I know that does scare a lot of people in grief. It scared me. Some days it does still scare me. I can't lie. And I know I get piles of emails from listeners about how they're still scared over that.
I don't think it scares only people who are grieving. I think it scares everyone because we are raised to believe that there is nothing after life. And this is the prevailing philosophical framework that we learn in schools and college, and that we are raised to believe that there is nothing. Your consciousness in your mind is generated by the brain. If your body dies, you die and nothing remains. So we have to change what we've been taught during our entire lives, and that involves a lot of things. There's a lot of cognitive accommodation. There is a lot of the way you live your life is revolves around your belief, and if you change your belief, so many other things change. Everything in your life revolves around your beliefs. And suddenly, if you are facing a different ideology, like a different belief that now that there is a afterlife, you're like, it is an ontological shock. That's how we call it. And it is literally a shock. And people take many years to accommodate a new belief and to process and integrate information and to come to. So it's not something that happens overnight. It just scares people. And another reason is many scientists, I would say that in the scientific community, many people build their own careers within the materialistic, physicalist framework. So they are publishing papers and books saying this is how consciousness arises in the thalamus, in the connection between thalamus and cortex. No, it's in that region. Is that region talking to that region? And then you become aware. And suddenly when you say consciousness is not produced by the brain anymore, you were ruining people's career, and no one wants that.
Yeah, I guess I never think of the fear of hearing that it's real. I just think of the fear of hearing it's not real. But that makes sense. Some people, I I mean, to me, it seemed like the best thing in the world when I started finding more and more it's real is, so then whenever I hear and I get this, so I get from my listeners, they get terrified, then they start getting hope. And then they read the scientific evaluations that it's fake, and then, they get scared. I still get scared. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to think, that there's fear on the other end too, that people would be scared that there would be an afterlife instead of just joyful, so.
That is interesting. I think I misunderstood your question.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I realized you did, but it was I didn't want to interrupt because it was very interesting what you were saying, because I felt it answered why so many scientists are dismissive of this. Yeah, I was talking about the fear that people are in grief, they think there's no afterlife. They discover DOPS, they discover this, and it gives a hope, and it gives a joy. And then you hear the scientists say, but it's not true.
Yeah.
And you think, if this is I consider this the most groundbreaking research I've ever read. So I sometimes wonder, why are people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, like all the big scientists, the covers of every scientific magazine around the world, why are they not as blown away by this? And why do they say that's not true? And so what are your thoughts on the fact that they aren't? But I guess you answered that because it's their fear. So you did. Yeah.
Answering to the question that I misunderstood, the fear of believing and not being true. I think like you gave the answer. It's like, especially when you're grieving, you don't want to have a false hope. You really want to believe that the person is still alive and you're going to connect after you pass away in an afterlife. So no one wants to have a false hope, and there is a lot of fear about that. And it's very interesting because last week I was talking to a journalist, and she approached me to talk specifically about mediumship in the context of grieving. And she's been having communications with her deceased daughter. And she passed 2 years ago, and she's been having a lot of experiences that she said at some point, I just cannot dismiss them anymore. She was in the beginning not wanting to believe. She was very physicalist, and she said it can't be, it's just wishful thinking, but they're just happening all the time. And she even received a message from a medium that corroborates everything that she's experiencing at home. And then she called me, and all the time she said, I know it's going to sound crazy. I know it's going to sound crazy, but this happened. I know it's going to sound crazy. And she was so worried about her image and believing. And, that fear is still there. And she was so scared of believing in something that could not be true. Because just like you, she said, there are scientists saying there is no afterlife. There's no such a thing. This is wishful thinking. And then she asked me, what is your opinion, Marina? But yeah, I think it's just people don't wanna have false hopes. And another thing that is very sad that happens is people don't want to be ridiculed. And unfortunately that happens. If you believe in an afterlife, people are gonna sometimes more sometimes more subtle, like, no, this is just wishful thinking. Yes, I understand. She just passed away. You need that, just dismissing in a way. Other people are more aggressive, and they are actually gonna say demeaning things and ridicule someone because they believe in an afterlife, and that's another fear. No one wants to be ridiculed because they're believing something.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm used to it now. Here I am with the podcast, but I was very scared in the beginning. So we're over an hour. Can you answer one more question, then close out with where to find you? Great. And what are your thoughts on an afterlife? Do you think it's true at this point?
It's an interesting question. What I like to say is that if you are not at least open to the possibility of an afterlife, is because you haven't read about the evidence yet. Think about the evidence about the independence of mind and possibly an afterlife is overwhelming. We have over 150 years of very well conducted and documented research. And if someone just really has the time to read about the evidence, read about the papers, talk to people, I find it very hard not to be open to the idea.
Well, that is very encouraging. And I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for all the work you do with DOPS. It was the thing that got me through the first few months of the loss of my dad, and it's only strengthened. So thank you. And tell us where our listeners can find you, follow you, and also follow and find everything at the University of Virginia.
Yeah. They can find me in Charlottesville, Virginia, United States. This is where I work.
If anyone wants to show up in person, maybe don't do that. Maybe follow Marina on social media and not surprise her with an in-person visit unless you're inviting people.
I'm not inviting anyone. And if you cannot come to Charlottesville in person, you can find us on the DOPS website. Is very easy to find, DOPS UVA Virginia. And we have a tab only for staff and researchers and faculty. Everyone's email is listed there. It's super easy to find.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz, for having me here.
Are you like me and have a hard time learning to listen to or trust your intuition? Or you trust it, but would like to know how to better tune into your intuition? I want to share this event I'm attending. It's called Amplify Your Intuition, a guided journey to trusting your inner wisdom, taught by Karen Bell, who's an internationally recognized clairvoyant and channeler. This event will be hosted by one of my favorite places, the Omega Institute, where transformation becomes real. It's virtual, so it'll be affordable and easy to attend. As we all know, intuition is one of the most powerful tools we have to understand our life purpose, the right people for us, the wrong people for us. In this Omega workshop, Karen gives us simple tools to help us recognize the subtle ways intuition speaks, how to differentiate it from fear or wishful thinking, and how to cultivate trust in our inner guidance. I'll be there. I go to as many Omega events as I can. It will be March 4th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. EST. You can sign up on eomega.org. And while you're there, be sure to check out their other incredible transformative events. That's eomega.org. To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_ or email me at hello@WTFJustHappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?